I'm going to share my screen real quick. All right. Oh, showing the wrong one. That's not the one. Let's share. Is that right? Oh, yeah, this is the one I want to share. Okay. I think that's right. Okay. Interesting. Hopefully everyone can see my everyone can see my screen all right. If you can't, let me know and I will work on that. But yeah, I think everyone should be able to see that. I'm just trying to get my chat room back. How do I get my chat room? Come here. Chat, thank you. Okay, great. All right, cool. So answering Colorado's tricky interview questions. This is obviously one of the most challenging interviews out there. And I'm just talking about, I'm not necessarily even talking about the bench test because it's not necessarily the most challenging bench test out there, but it is one of the more challenging interviews out there. And that's because they change it a lot. They have an intentionality to make it difficult and to try to throw people off. The other one that I'd say is equally as difficult would be UCSF, perhaps even more so. And so definitely something to think about, but it's good to be prepared. So what do we know so far? I said this a little bit in the last video if you were able to see any of it, but we know that the interview has a panel style. So we'll get into that in a second. We know it has a radiograph interpretation along with that, where you'll be asked to given some radiographs and asked to interpret those. And then there's an essay response aspect. Now that's it's not part of the actual interview per se, but it is part of the process of being selected. So that essay response, as I was saying a little earlier, is just mostly for people to be able to know that you can write, and that even though you may have had some help with your application documents, you still have the ability to write on the go. And it wasn't just somebody that helped you completely, like you're able to do all that. Now, when we talk about why is Colorado so challenging, again, as I mentioned, it's mostly because of the ethical questions and the hypothetical questions. I would say those pretty much categorize what makes Colorado so difficult. Every other interview out there, for the most part, follows a pretty standard interview format in which you're asked general questions about yourself, maybe an ethical question here or there, but nothing too extreme. Whereas Colorado, they really get into it and want to know what you think about different complex situations. The other one that might be interesting would be like, I believe Michigan now has gone to something called the MMI, multiple something interview. MMI, sorry, off the top of my head. But that one is also pretty tricky because that also incorporates a lot of ethical situations and asks you to just kind of talk about things from a perspective of think, if you're given a challenging situation, what would you do in that situation? And there's no right answer. Someone said they can't hear me, so I just want to make sure everyone can. If anyone is having trouble, please put that out. I imagine I would have heard that by now from some other people. But for those of you who can't hear me, make sure that your speakers and stuff are working. I know you're using Zoom, so this is maybe a new software for you. And the other question I got is, what kind of questions are in the essay selection or essay section? Mostly they're kind of similar to the application. If you think about the supplemental questions that you're submitting for the Colorado application or that you've submitted, they would be pretty similar to that. Why did you get into dentistry? What makes you passionate about dentistry? That kind of stuff. Usually, it's not stuff that is like necessarily clinically specific or some sort of test on dental clinical knowledge or something like that. It's pretty much the kind of stuff you'd see in the supplemental questions. So you can kind of go through their supplemental questions and just get an idea for the kind of stuff they want. Again, it's more of a writing exercise. They just want to make sure you're the one who wrote your SOP for the most part. And I know some of you have got help. We actually help people anyway, but that's actually one of the reasons we don't ghostwrite for our clients that we work with. We actually ask them to write their own draft because, again, that's also going to help you with a lot of these kind of essay questions to know how to do that. All right. And probabilities, it's hard to know what the probabilities of entrance with the Colorado is. What I will say is they invite tons of people, and right, so it's tons of people over time. And so they really have a lot of, they can be picky. They're one of the more picky schools in that sense that I've seen, in that they invite a lot of people, but they don't, they really want to, because they invite so many people, they can really just say, yeah, this one, that one. And so they do have a large program, but they, even within that, it's I'd say most of the candidates that I've seen for Colorado usually get in the second interview, meaning that they interview with Colorado first. They get maybe put on the wait list if they're good, even if they're good or they're pretty competitive. Colorado, for some reason, has a knack of asking people to come back again. And if they do ask you, it means that you have a good chance, sometimes you have a better chance that second year. And what they want to see that second year is, have you improved your profile? Have you improved your interview skills? Have you improved your bench test skills? What are you showing us this second time? And a lot of times I hear people getting in that second year more than the first year. Of course, there's always the people that are just kind of more stellar candidates that are going to get in that first year anyway. But for those of you who are kind of in the middle, not necessarily the most, strongest in terms of profile, stats, et cetera, experience, a lot of times it's the second year people get in. So, and by the way, I'm the reason I'm not getting too much into the essay questions is just because there's so much to talk about with the interview questions. So, I don't know exactly. I know Suchi is asking how long should these essay questions be, or how long are they? I guess I would say, as a rule of thumb, if you just look at if you look at the supplemental questions and the character counts that they're giving you in the supplemental question for Colorado, that's probably what I would prepare for. They might maybe be off a little bit in terms of character length or character amounts, or word limit, but probably not by much. It's just standard paragraph typically. Cool. Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about it. If you feel comfortable answering those supplementals and you can just do it on the spot, you'll be fine probably for the essay. Cool. So Colorado, University of Colorado. Just want to kind of throw out there, we don't guarantee the accuracy of this information. This is basically technically outdated because we just don't know what's happening this year, right? So it's not outdated in the sense of, it's probably mostly relevant, but it's not something that we can guarantee we know at this point. It's our best guess based on past information given to us by candidates that work with us. If you are surprised, and maybe they go from, again, I'm telling you, they're going to do a 4-person panel interview. Maybe this time it's one-on-one. You're like, hey, Kevin didn't tell me about this. He threw me off. Well, guess what? Everyone else is going to be thrown off too. So it's just kind of levels the playing field. So even if you are kind of thrown off, you'll be good because you're prepared in general for it. So I just say the more prepared you are, you can't really lose. Again, the 4-person panel interview is typical for Colorado, though. 2 faculty usually, and 2 students. And they like to encourage their current students to come and be a part of the selection process. Now, what kind of occurs to me right now is I'm not sure that this is going to happen this year with some of the stuff we're dealing with the virus. If they keep these dates and they don't cancel or reschedule them, it's possible they might, and probably would be a smart move to not include the students or just make it more voluntary or something like that. But there's a chance that might change, and you might end up with just faculty members because they don't want to put the students at risk or put you guys at risk or something like that. So who knows? I'm just kind of throwing that out there. But typically in the past, been 2 students. Those situational questions and the ethical questions are what they're famous for. And also kind of questions about your persona, your personality, meaning what would you do in a certain situation professionally, etc. So, and the questions and vibe depends on the panel. Everything is different. Sometimes they'll talk to a candidate who's gone through Colorado and they're like, everyone was so friendly and warm and nice. And then sometimes, and not very often, sometimes I've had a few candidates that have gone and they've just been like, wow, that was so intense. The students were out to get me. They were trying to bring me down. So it's just, you can really depend on the mix of the group. And that's the kind of the interesting thing about Colorado. That said, I have rarely found any candidate that's walked away who said that they had a bad experience or that they were mean. I think they're pretty good about being consistently positive and supportive and stuff like that. The other thing I want to say too is if you go through a Colorado interview and you don't get accepted, please note that they're one of the best schools for providing you feedback on how you did. And they take good notes during the interview and the bench test, and they write it in your file. You have a big file that will carry on to the next year. And so they read it before they talk to you again if you applied the previous year. But what's nice about it is they're really open and transparent about that compared to most schools. And if you ask them, hey, I know I didn't get accepted or I got rejected or I got on the wait list, can you give me some feedback about how I did? Their admins will basically email you a lot of the notes that were in your file about how you did and where you were weak. Was it the bench test? Was it the interview? Was it the fact that you didn't have the right profile that they were looking for? And maybe a mix of all those. So they'll give you some really good, clear notes. Now, they're not going to tell you what questions you messed up on and stuff like that, or what was wrong with your prep, but they'll at least tell you where you should be focused. And that's really helpful, I think, for people who don't know, okay, what was it, the interview or the bench test, stuff like that. So that's great. Again, heavy and ethical questions, foreign trained dental experience, they'll go into that. They'll talk to us about your background in your home country as much as you can, whether whether you had just some dental school or whether you have dental school and a number of years working as a dentist. And then again, they'll also go through your SOP. They'll go through your CV. Now, they may not ask questions from either of those documents, but they typically do with a CV. 80% of the time, I guess I would say that they're going to ask some stuff off your CV, and maybe less so, but could happen if you have a pretty interesting aspect or fact in your SOP, and they just want to hear more about that. If you have an interesting story in there, they're going to want to find out from you tell us more about that. What was going on? Okay. So let's get in. What I really mostly want to do tonight was get in, because this is about the tricky questions of the Colorado interview. And I wanted to get into some straightforward questions, some medium level questions, and some tricky questions. Let's really kind of cover the gambit of everything that you might see in a Colorado interview, and just kind of have a plan for how you're going to tackle some of these. First one, what was good and bad about your dental school? A lot of people don't really know what the tactic here should be. And so I want to give kind of tactics and guidelines for each of these questions if I can, if we have a little time here. The goal is not to make your dental school seem perfect. It's not a test to try to get you to tell them whether you went to a good dental school or not, or something like that. In a way, this is a test of how aware you are, how cognizant you are of how good your dental school was, and where if you were able to see problems as well as positives, so positives as well as negatives. And anyone who doesn't have the ability to see the negatives of a school they went to or a program they went to or place they worked at, and they're either is lying because they wanted to look good, which is, you fail that test by not answering anything bad, or you're just clueless, right? So either way, it's not a good thing for a candidate. So what was good about and bad about your dental school? So you don't want to answer just positive. This is what I think I typically see most of, is people just answering really positive things. Everything was great. And even when I ask in like an interview, well, what was bad about your dental school? Sometimes, and if I asked good and bad, people will usually just give me the good and conveniently leave out the bad. And so we really want to balance these answers. Now, on the other hand, if all you're doing is complaining about your dental school, well, what does that tell us? It tells us that maybe there's something weird with their attitude. This candidate, they have a bad attitude. They're kind of like, Eeyore and Winnie the Pooh. Everything's bad, everything's depressing, everything's a glass half empty kind of person, right? And that's not attractive for a selection committee, because they're going to have to work with you. They're going to have to teach you, interact with you on a day-to-day basis. And if they think you have just a negative attitude and everything wasn't good enough, well, guess what? You're going to do that to them too. People are going to say, "How was Colorado? How did you enjoy your experience at school there?" "Oh, they're not very good. They didn't give me this," and they were, that's not what they want. They don't want somebody in there with that kind of attitude. So again, finding that balance, and the balance showcases somebody who has the ability to be conscious and know what's good and bad and discernment, but also somebody who can be positive and thankful and grateful. And that's a really attractive quality. So think about that when you're looking at your dental school. You know, the other way people will answer this is to just stay on the safe side and only talk about technology. Oh, we didn't have enough technology. Probably there's more to it than that, right? Like any one school is going to have resources or not. They're going to have lots of resources or not. But more importantly, every school has a different type of methodology, teaching methodology. And so to be able to analyze and discuss the merits of the academic philosophy of your school, as well as the drawbacks, shows a higher level of thinking, higher level of critical thinking on your part. It shows you that you have the ability to analyze things in a more complex way. Whereas if you just say, well, we didn't have enough technology, we didn't have enough money, it just shows that the candidates kind of has a more simple ability. They're not very analytical, and you want to show yourself as in the best light as possible. So be a little more thoughtful about what was the good and bad of your dental school, and get into some of that stuff. What could they have done better, and what were some of their merits? But also, where do they, for example, maybe they just focus so much on the practical. Do this, use this material, and when you're preparing a crown, use that. Here's this tactic, here's that tactic. But they don't tell you why. They don't tell you why a particular method might lead to. It's been shown through data, empirical data, that this particular material leads to less problems down the road, right? So the why, or maybe the structure, maybe there's a certain geometry to the structure that they're able to teach. Thinking about things from a why, theoretical as well as a practical, shows it it's a kind of a balanced way of approaching teaching, right? And so you might think about that as an example. Did your school just tell you what to do, or did they tell you what to do and why it's done that way? So that might be something that, for me, I can look at my school and say, yeah, they could have given us more theory. They just gave us more practical stuff instead. Let's look at another one. Do you consider, oops, I'm going too fast. Do you consider yourself a leader or a follower? This is a pretty straightforward interview question. I'm going to let you all kind of decide what you want to be in this case. But what I will say is there's not a right answer. There's not just always someone who should be a leader. And the other thing to note is that with any program, when they're selecting who they want to when they're building basically a cohort of students, they want to their goal is to try to create a relatively diverse student body that, when together, is going to create an optimal learning environment. So if everybody's a leader, I'm a leader, right? What do you get? You get a bunch of rams, ramming into each other. Maybe personality-wise, everyone's trying to step on top of each other. Not always a good situation. If you have everyone who's a follower, now you have just people who just don't take action, right? So they're looking and saying, we have 10 people, we want 5, maybe we want 7 followers and 3 leaders, something like that. So for you really just have to be honest with yourself, to stop looking for the right answer and just say, well, what am I? And then your goal is to make whatever you are sound good, right? That's the main goal. So don't worry about what the right answer for these are. For me, I would be I've become more of a leader now. But it depends. I might say in certain circumstances, like a professional environment, in my career, I'm more of a leader, but in my personal life, if I'm in a social group or something, I'm more of a follower. And the reason for that is I just, I really, whatever I'm doing career-wise, I really enjoy it. I really want to be a part of it, of the decision making. I feel like I'm quite good at that. I have the ability to help draw out good ideas from a group, and so those are my skills. Whereas the social aspect, I'm just there to have a nice time. So I might look at that as, that might be an answer that I give something to that effect. So, just look at what's true for you with that one. If you don't get in this year, will you apply again, and what would you do? So, this is pretty simple. I would probably say this one does have more of a right answer. What they're kind of testing here is, are you somebody who has persistence? And you know, are you the kind of person that would get back on the horse if you fall off? I think that's usually a good idea to say yes for that one. But you might look at the what would you do part might be like, well, what would you do to make sure that the next time you apply, you're in a better place, you profile wise. And so I might even say, you know, yes, I would absolutely apply again next year if I don't get in. You know, University of Colorado is one of my top choices for the following reasons, or you know, to give a reason or two. And then you know, if I didn't get in, I would, you know, I'd want to know. I might contact the school to find out what I could do better, and I would look at ways that I could improve my profile and to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to be ready to go for next year. So something like that would be good. Greatest challenge you face after coming to the U.S. in dentistry. This one I'm just going to say as a caveat, be careful of cliched responses or what you think might be a cliche response in the international dentist community. Everyone's probably going to say, you know, a lot of people are going to want to say cap it, or not cap it, maybe cap it, but they also might say part 1, part 2 would be the most difficult thing. They might say just getting into dent, you know, want to become a dentist. This is so hard. This question is about what you, and by the way, all these questions are from Colorado, so we're stealing them from real interviews. I would say in this one, I would really get into as much as you can into the clinical experience you've had in the US and focus on that versus just like, oh, I don't like how I'm in this advanced same process, or I have to go through this process to get my degree. This is so frustrating. Stay away from that kind of stuff because it's more complaining, and get to the, you know, I started to observe, or I started to get I worked as a dental assistant, and I wasn't used to the way patients really knew much more than patients do in my home country, or something like that. I was, you know, I was impressed by that, but I also was challenged. It was a challenge for me because I had to learn how to talk and speak to them in a different way than I was used to before. So stuff like that might be interesting. So really get into the actual focus on the office work that you've done, dental office work that is, not just on things you're upset about the process and how difficult and competitive it is. Let's get into more challenging questions. Oh, same. It looks like we repeated myself for that one. So forget the first one. If you learned about an upcoming optional lecture in implantology, something you were very interested in, yet the lecture took place at the same time as an oral pathology class, would you skip your OP class to go? So this is an interesting question. This is where I'm saying these get a little more challenging, and these kind of questions now put you in kind of a dilemma. They're not necessarily, this is not an ethical dilemma because there's no right or wrong to it. It's kind of more, is it wise or unwise? Is it in your best interest or not? Whereas an ethical dilemma, the question is more, is it in the patient's interest or not? Is it going to hurt the patient or help the patient, or hurt the office or help the office, whatever. This one's more just, is it smart for you to do this or not? And it's a tricky question because, you know, you're kind of asked to make a choice, and one is sort of the right, you know, the safe answer, I guess, would be, oh no, I would just stay and attend my lecture in oral pathology because that's what good people do, kind of stuff. You know, obviously in this one, I would try this. Now I may not get, you know, it's sort of like you may get caught and you may be sent back to the beginning again. But what I would at least try is to start off this way by saying, if I really, you know, I do love implantology. I think it's a fascinating topic. You know, it's incredible to me to see how far dentistry has come, where we're actually able to implant a tooth compared to the old days where the best we could do is maybe a root canal if we had the opportunity. And so it's pretty amazing to me. I'd love to be able to go to that, especially if I was, you know, as I said, if I was very interested in that. I would first go and communicate with my oral pathology professor, see if I could send them an email, even if I could visit them a day before or a couple days before during their office hours or after class, to say, you know, I really want to come to this, go to this implantology lecture. Would it be all right if, and just kind of run it by them. Now that's probably the easiest and safest answer. They might say something back like, yeah, okay, well, what if you had to choose? There was no option. The professor said no, or it just wasn't available to get that permission. What would you do? Would you skip it or would you go? And, I think in this case, I'd probably say I would go back to my oral pathology class. That's just me. There's a risk here, I guess. I'm always kind of in my mind thinking about what are the risks, and is it worth taking the risk? So if I say I'm going to go anyway, it shows me as someone who obviously is very passionate about the topic, but is more willing to break the rules and not follow the rules. Now they might extrapolate that and think, okay, well, Kevin's willing to break the rule without telling anybody. He's just going to go to this implantology lecture. So it might be the case that if we ask him to do treatment this way or that way, he might break the rules because he doesn't want to. He doesn't feel like he's restrained to do that. And I feel like that is something that they're really sensitive about, especially with international dentists, because you all are not just fresh dental students like a lot of the other folks in the dental school who are going to, this will be their third year when you meet them. They are, you guys are, for the most part, practicing dentists in your home country. You've already had work experience and you've already been given that authority and you have that expertise compared to most of the folks who just have gone through the school from the beginning. And so they're a little more sensitive to the fact that you guys might think you don't need to follow the rules. Hey, I've already done all this. I've been through dental school. I don't need to follow these rules. I'm just going to go do what I want. So again, I would, as great as it is to show passion and interest in a particular topic, I think the safer answer is to say you'll go to the class. And what I might even throw in there is, okay, I would go to the class because it's right to go to the class, but I would try to contact the lecturer to see if I could get the notes of the slideshow. So that shows again, I'm trying to fill both sides there. Let's talk about views about cheating. This is a big one, but this happens on almost every school, but I think it's still important to keep it in the perspective of Colorado, because you might get a few questions about this. In general, this is sort of like there is a right answer. There is a right answer for this question in particular, because when you join the program, you're going to be asked to sign a document. Basically, it's sort of like you agree that you're going to follow the student handbook usually, or the student rules policy. And they won't let you in until you sign that. And the agreement in the student policy is always, if I see any cheating, I will report it immediately to who's ever in power, to the teacher, to the professor, to the dean, whatever like that, whoever you can. At least you need to tell some authority figure. And so your view should always be indeed to that you're going to report it. Now, they might ask this question exactly like this: what are your views about cheating? In this case, I would say something like, my views are that it's just I would get passionate about this, because what you don't want is to be like, well, it's the right thing to do is to report it. Of course, I would report it. Pretty flat answer. I would want to talk about what infuriates me about cheaters, so that they feel that there's actually some truth behind what I'm saying. Because in reality, most students, most dental students are not going to report their fellow classmates if they see cheating going on, whether that be on a test or whether it be in the lab. They're not going to do it because people just, we're typically kind of sheepish about that. And so they know that. They know that that's the reality. But what they want to do is say, is this person do they at least know what the right thing to do is? Because at least if you know what the right thing to do is, and you know it's right to turn somebody in, there is a higher chance you will than the person who's like, I don't even think you should. Because some people that really don't, that think it's worse to tell an authority figure about something someone did, like that's the bigger crime. Like, oh, I turned them in. I'm a traitor to my friend or to my class. And so you have to kind of prove to them that you understand how important cheating is and how dangerous it is. And so I would talk about, first of all, it undercuts everybody else who's studied hard. And besides just being, rude to everybody, we all studied hard and this person is getting away with cheating. Secondly, what are the long-term effects of this? It's obviously going to make a huge difference down the road. And if this person's cheating on a test, are they going to cheat their patients are they going to cheat and be unethical with treatments that they suggest to their patients or try to treat their patients? Are they going to be unethical to their employees? Are they going to be unethical to their to paying taxes? All that stuff. So it's just the start of a behavior that's going to lead to problems, and it's going to also affect the entire industry. Dentists do have kind of a partly of a bad reputation. They can, at least in the U.S., at least because there's a stereotype that they will make up stuff and overtreat basically, and you got to make sure you get a lot of second opinions. Not the most pristine reputation, definitely not terrible, but kind of in that middle to good range, I'd say. But the American Dental Association, these organizations are there to protect the prestige of dentistry, and that's one of the reasons that these dental schools need to make sure that they don't allow cheaters in and they don't allow them to continue. So they might expel somebody if they see a big cheating happen. And so you want to talk about just how it infuriates you and it's going to lead to problems down the road. It's going to affect the reputation of dentistry. It's going to affect the patients. You don't want patients to get hurt, that kind of stuff. Now, they might ask it to you in a different question. They might ask it with, like, what would you do if you were in a classroom? Same idea. I would always reply that I would tell that person. Now, I wouldn't just do it automatically. I would make sure that there's some passion in my response, that I'm a bit of like, yeah, of course I would, that kind of thing. How would you manage college, or how would you manage this program with like a 2-year-old daughter? This is one that I think is just, I like to put in there just because a lot of people do have a situation like that. And your goal is, you're probably not going to get it. Oh yeah. So you would get this if you kind of probably indicated somewhere. A lot of people will indicate on their SOP that they do have a child, and they're, my child is the light of my life. I'm so, I want to do this for them. Well, now you're going to get a question like that in your interview. Okay, well, how are you going to handle this program, or a very intense program? How are you going to do this plus a 2-year-old daughter? I have a 2-year-old daughter, so I know how difficult it would just, it would be. Obviously I haven't done dental school in that, but I can only imagine that would be quite intense. And so you're going to want to have a good plan that you give them so they know that you're serious, that you have thought about this. And the plan should not just be, well, we'll figure it out when we get there, or, I'll switch back and forth with my spouse to try to balance things. They might be able to take off some time from work. It has to be something where you're either going to have a nanny full-time, you're going to have a family member full-time living with you or staying with you, or you're going to have something more than just sending them to daycare, I think, because we want to give them the most robust plan possible. Now, I'm not saying you have to have this plan and enact it yourself, but you need to have a good sounding plan. That's better than just, oh, well, we'll figure it out, or we'll just send them to I know there's a university child center, the daycare center there. Got to have a good plan, a plan that's like solid, because again, they're taking a risk on you. It's costly, right? So let's say you don't make it through the program. Now, let's say that this program is, I don't know, $150,000 to $200,000 of tuition, right? As these are. And you, because they selected you, you had a 2-year-old daughter, you go in, you're 3 months in, and you're like, oh, this is much harder than I thought. I'm going to quit. And you quit the program, give up. Well, yeah, you lost out. You lost out on a big career and all that stuff. That's its own sad situation. But more for them, more importantly, is that they see this as a big risk. That's could be $120,000 that they just gave up. And they're, as a school, budget-wise, all this stuff, especially public schools, they're, and private even, they're always thinking about money and budget and stuff like that. So you have to make sure that you're thinking about making sure that they feel confident that you're going to make it through. So a really good plan is so important. All right, let's get to the last slide. Almost finished. These are the more tricky ones. And again, I'm just giving you some examples of the trickier ones that I've come across, and how do you want to get through them? How do you want to answer them? Do you lie? This is one that I think is a fun one that I've heard from a candidate who went to Colorado. It was really direct, right out of the blue, like, do you lie? Tell us the truth. And it kind of throws you off because it's not very well softly worded. And um, I think the way to answer this is to admit some level like that you're human. And so that's the way I would approach it myself. I just like, well, you know, here's the deal. There's there's white lies, and then there's lies that can really damage and hurt people, and are more on the vicious side. I think I have in my life always striven, or always I've always tried as best I can to be as honest and transparent as I can with whomever I'm dealing with. But there are times when I've told a white lie just maybe to save someone from getting their feelings hurt. Maybe I would do that, or maybe just because I don't want them to be. Um, Sometimes saying what's on your mind is not always the kindest thing to do, and so there's been times where the friend has asked me, some feedback that what do I think about a situation, and I didn't. I might have said, yeah, go for it, go do that, even if I felt like I wasn't sure if that was the best thing to do. And so there's times where I've told a white lie, but I really try my best. My goal in life is to be as authentic as I can, as transparent as I can, and have as much integrity as I can. I think that's ultimately the best approach. And especially when we talk about professionalism, and especially healthcare, I think that's where you really have to be absolutely full of integrity. And so I've never told a lie to a patient, especially about their health. I strive to be as honest and as clear as I can, and that's my attitude. That's my motto, and that's what I would continue to do if I were to get into your program and go beyond in my career. And I keep that level of integrity going. So something like that, where if I had just said that last part about how I strive to be always clear and blah, 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 and don't want to, and the damages that lying can do to patients, that would just sound like too much of a goody two shoes answer, and it might sound just a little unbelievable. They would just and they might push back on me anyway, which I don't want. I don't want them circling back and come on, you never lied before. That's where interviews get uncomfortable, and it can happen when you tell too perfect of an answer. So you want to have a little bit of like, okay, I'll give it to you. I've told a few lies, white lies, maybe to my child, like, we're going to go to the park tomorrow, even though I knew it was going to rain, just so that they would go to bed. There's times where we all have to do that kind of stuff. But in general, this is what I strive to do. I strive to be as best as I can. And I think people will allow that and forgive it enough, whether they're okay, cool, I don't have to go after him and try to squeeze out that he maybe has lied, or he's just trying to pretend. And I used to do that when I would interview a lot of candidates. Is if I felt like their answer was too good to be true, I would enjoy going after them. And that's what I hear a lot from candidates who go to Colorado. They have, especially with the students in their interview, the students don't really care. They're having fun, and they just kind of go and they'll ask follow-up questions that are pretty uncomfortable and like to put them on the spot. So you just want to kind of be careful of that. One of the bigger questions that we hear from Colorado is about this kind of scenario. We talked about different situational questions, and one would be like, you have a professor. I'll just give you the basic one, and we use it a lot when we're practicing for Colorado. You have a professor in the lab, let's say, or not in your lab, but a professor in the clinic, and you have done a treatment plan. They've approved that treatment plan, and then for whatever reason, you're about to start that treatment plan on the patient, and maybe a professor who's now on duty, the other one went home or is no longer present. The new professor comes on duty, they look at about what you're about to do, they ask you about the treatment plan, then they say, oh, no, we're not going to do this, we're going to do that instead. And they change the treatment plan on you in the middle, right before you're about to begin the treatment. What would you do in that case? And so this is one where it's a little tricky, right? You mostly, the approach is to just be respectful. And what I mean by that especially is the key to this, to responding to this is to not forget who you are and who the authority figures are. This is especially a good question for international dentists because they've had a lot of practice already in the real world, and they might disagree with the new treatment plan that the professor's just given them. They're like, you know, that's not going to work. I don't want to do that. I'm going to do what the previous professor agreed to. And if that's the case, then what you're doing is you're now practicing kind of rogue, meaning that you're only the only reason you're able to practice in the United States any dentistry is because you're able to practice under the authority of that dental school, which is basically in that moment the authority of that dental professor. That dental professor is allowing you to use their dental license, if you will, and the fact they're professor and the school's institutional license to practice and treat this patient is not because you get to make those kind of decisions. So really understanding that the professor is always in charge, no matter who happens to be the one in charge now. So what I would just say is, okay, well, a couple ways it could go. If the older professor left, who gave me the original treatment plan, if they're gone now from the clinic, then I might suggest to the new professor, well, this is what we discussed and this is why, what do you think? And if the professor still said, no, we're going to do it the other way, I would have to yield to that new professor and do it the way they wanted. However, if the other professor is just walking around and I have two professors on my hand, now I'm in a different situation, and maybe in that case, I would try to create a huddle, try to create like a little quick meeting before we actually, and away from the patient, so that we can, I'd say, you know, Dr. So-and-so over there has a different plan, and I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. Would you mind if the three of us just met quickly just to decide before starting any treatment? And hopefully that would be the resolution to it. Now, I've heard the question asked in both ways. One is when both professors are on duty and they're kind of just in different parts of the room and they're giving you different mixed messages. And the other is one goes home and the new one comes online and you kind of have to deal with it that way. But either way, what you don't want to say is, well, I would look at this treatment because this treatment is better, I think. That's, you know, automatic business, you know, it's a red. So we don't want to do that. So we want to make sure we're giving the authority, we're always giving our authority to the professor, that they are the ultimate deciders, not us. Even if we do think we know better, we always want to make sure we're showing the school that we're not the kind of person that's going to take matters into our own hands. Now, this is an interesting one, right? If you're working and your dental assistant stops you and says you're about to do the wrong thing, right on you're here with a patient, you're doing a treatment, and your dental assistant has the gall to stop you, and maybe they should, and tells you, you know, hey, doctor, you're about to you're about to go on the wrong tooth or something, and you're like, ooh, well, that's kind of bad, right? Because not only is it embarrassing, but it also could affect the patient's trust of you as a doctor. Suddenly they're like, oh my gosh, get me out of this chair. What do you do in that situation? And then, you know, in Colorado, they actually might give you the specific thing that the assistant says. And so the best way to respond to this is, you know, in real life, I don't know what I would do, but I would say in the interview, what I would probably talk about is the importance of feedback, and the importance of making sure that I'm listening, I'm learning, and but also I'm teaching. So I might start and just say, you know, if that assistant saved me from or prevented me from making a big mistake, I'm going to be really grateful for that. And that could be, you know, a huge consequence, you know, legally, health-wise for the patient, all this stuff. So I'm going to, first of all, you know, let it seep in and just okay, thank you for letting me know that. Let me circle back. Let me check the chart again, that kind of thing, look like I'm professional. And then, you know, make sure that we're going forward and changing the course of action. But what I might do is circle back with my assistant later and just say, I really appreciate that you let me know about that right before I made that mistake. Thank you. In the future, just so that the patient feels comfortable, you know, please let me know that you need to talk to me one-on-one aside. That would be really helpful. That way we don't alarm the patient or make them feel like, you know, there's any kind of concern about us and the work that we do. And that would just be a little teaching moment for them. But overall, I'd be really grateful, and I profusely thank them for bringing that to my attention, because it was obviously something that helped save the patient, or save a bad situation from happening. So you just want to be graceful, thankful, and all that kind of stuff, and just showcase that. And these are, what I'm doing is mostly giving you hopefully the common sense responses to these. But what makes these challenging is that in the moment, your mind is kind of doing double thinking. First, you're trying to think about the situation, and then there's a layer on top of that where you're thinking to yourself, well, what do they want to hear? And you start to second guess yourself. And so in general, patient health is always number one. So always kind of think about that as patient health number one. Professionalism is maybe number two, all that stuff. Following reputation, and not dissing the reputation or disrespecting the reputation of other dentists is going to be a big one in some of these questions. And protocols, following protocols. These are what a lot of these questions are going to be about. And patient asks you to change the date on your form. Thank you, Shabeta. Let's look at that one real quick. Patient asks you to change the date on the form. What would you do? So this one is a good one. It's basically, obviously the answer is no, you would not, but how would you, now they might ask it a little more compellingly, like the patient tells you that they don't have any insurance, and they are about to run out of money this month, and they can't pay their water bill or their heating bill. They're in a really bad situation, and they come to you and they say, if you just change the date on this form, I'll be able to get the insurance to pay for this. Would you please, just for this one time, be willing to do that so I can get this covered by insurance? It's not a big deal, and maybe there's a reason that they need this done. You're sort of, maybe the insurance started just, recently, and the treatment happened a week ago or something like that. So it wouldn't have been covered. Just know the basics about insurance and dates and stuff is that would be insurance fraud. So insurance fraud, if you're not aware, in the United States it's a felony. Huge consequences. And the reason I say this again is, the reason I put this one up there is because it's different from every country. I've been to some countries, I've lived in some countries where this would happen left and right, and the government really wouldn't do much about it. In this country, it's highly punishable. You could lose your dental license easily. And you might be tried at court in a federal court. The insurance companies have a lot of power, and they've lobbied for some very strong laws in the U.S. And so you never, ever, ever want to mess around with insurance because of this. It could be huge consequences. And so the answer is, like cheating, is always going to be no matter what. Now the trick is, of course, is just how do you communicate to that? Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that you can't pay your water bill. I really, if I can, maybe I might give them a little discount if they haven't paid yet. If I really need to, maybe I might give them a little refund. That's not illegal, right? It's up to me if I really feel sorry for them. But I'm never going to change a date for insurance. I'm just going to say, I really can't do that. But I might give you, maybe, if you need to come back for a clean, I'm happy to offer you a free clean. Give them something so they feel like you're trying. Make sure it's totally legal. You're just giving them a little bit of a something just to kind of make them a little appeased or whatever like that, and make it a little easier for them. That shows empathy and compassion, but ethics still. You're still keeping that strong integrity. So thank you for bringing that up to me, that I missed that question. Cool. All right. So let's look at some other questions. If you guys have any questions you want me to respond to, I know I haven't covered all the types of questions. And the other thing about Colorado is that there are so many new questions that come up every year. And one of their goals is to come up with new questions that no one's heard of before, because they know that people come back and they tell their friends about, go on Facebook. Here's the questions they asked me. They see that. They're part of the same groups. They see it on Student Doctor Network. And so in order to avoid that, they come up with brand new questions every year. And they really think and actually have the students participate to come up with really complicated, interesting questions that are kind of real life scenarios that they've faced. And so you'll get some ones that you really can be stumped by. But if you do have a question you'd like me to look at and give some thoughts on, throw it in the chat box. I just want to also say right now that someone asked me, asked us, two or three people this week have asked about if we have that Colorado special, because they're planning to go to Colorado. And so because I've got three, normally we don't, we ended that on February 29th, and that included basically like our bench test. I'll just show you what it includes. It includes the bench test mastery, it includes the interview mastery, and it also includes the dental radiology and radiographic interpretation course, as well as the workshop All Access Pass, which gives you access to all of our workshops that we currently have that are not publicly available, which is I think 80 or 90 hours of workshops. But anyway, we gave this was a deal that we kind of a special that we had going in January, and then we extended a little bit to February. But three people have asked about it, so I am going to offer it just until tomorrow night at midnight. So I'm going to put that, if anybody is interested and you are interested in preparing, I'm putting that in the Colorado special in the chat box, and you can get the link for that. That's just, again, something that's going to be available till tomorrow at midnight Pacific time. So if you are thinking about, you got to prepare for this, for your next, your upcoming interview at Colorado, you're not sure how, you're not sure if you're going to go to that in-person course or not. Again, as I was saying earlier, the nice thing about our course is that we excel at getting people to pass and get accepted via their bench test performance, and we do it all online. We've done this for years, so we really know what we're doing in terms of the online experience, and that's nice because you don't actually have to go and travel right now with all the stuff going on, the chaos that is going on, and of course this virus seems like such an unknown variable, and I really, for me, I don't want to see people traveling. If there's any way to avoid it, let's try to keep everyone safe and healthy. So anyway, that's available, yeah, and so you can just basically, if you don't, if you haven't done so already, basically buy the stuff from Amazon or eBay. It's pretty easy to get. You can set up a home bench test for, I don't know, $500-600 usually. And then you can start to practice. And again, if they do move these dates, if they do reschedule them, as I was saying earlier, there's a very good chance you're just still going to stay in the queue. You're not going to be pushed to, you're not going to be pushed off the list. We just don't know when. We just don't know what it's going to look like, I'm sure. So my thought is just, you might have more time to practice, and that's always a good thing with Colorado. Okay, so and if you have questions about particular aspects of the bench test course, I don't know. I'm not the one who teaches the bench test. I teach the interview side of things. So any questions about that, if you do have some questions about the bench test and you do want to talk to Dr. Alyssa, who knows the ins and outs of that course, either send us an email at mail@internationaldentistcentral.com, or we can even set up a quick chat with you and her if you have specific questions about what's in the course and all that stuff, and she can talk to you about that, because I mostly focus on the interview side, and that's what I prep people with. So if you have any questions about the interview stuff, definitely can ask. Someone says, Dave says, I came across this question. If you could give some insights tomorrow. Okay, tomorrow you have an exam, but your father has a heart attack tonight. How would you approach the situation? This is a question that it's a good question. Basically, I think they just want to see that you have your priorities straight. And if I were asking this question, I would want to know, it would kind of be a litmus test to me about how honest is this person? How honest is this candidate? Are they just kind of a kiss butt type of person where they're willing to tell me whatever I want to hear? Or are they somebody who has a backbone and they're willing to do what they think is the best thing to do? And I want the type of candidate who's the latter. I don't want a candidate who just tells me what they think I want to hear, because they usually are not going to do that in real life. In the interview, they're going to tell you everything. Oh, yeah, I would keep going. I would go to that exam, and I would try to tell my father I love him, but I'd go to that exam anyway. You might have candidates that say stuff like that. In real life, they would never do that, and the interviewers know that. They know, they can sniff that nonsense. So obviously, in the case like this, you would just have to say, you know what, my family, and I believe that family is, and the family health is a number one priority. I wouldn't want to miss an opportunity to spend the last day or two with my father. I don't know how long at this point he might have if he had a heart attack. And family first to me, these relationships in our lives, that's all we have. These people are all we have. And I'm very close to my father. And if this happened, my first response would be to go see him as quickly as possible. Once I was at the hospital, if I was able to go see him at the hospital, we're assuming he's local, and I would make sure that maybe he's stable. I might, if I had the time and I had some downtime, I'd certainly want to reach out and email my professor and let him know the situation, let her know the situation, about what's going on, and just hope for the best in that situation. But even if I have to suffer a grade, this could be the last night with my father. And I think ultimately in life we have to make these decisions, and sometimes it is about priorities. And for me, my priority of my family is number one. That doesn't mean that I don't absolutely love and appreciate and I'm grateful for the opportunity to go to a program like this. It's massive, and I can't state that enough. But nonetheless, what my father has been to me and done for me, that comes before anything. So that's what I would do. Now, who's going to fault you for that, right? No logical person's going to be like, oh, X, you got that wrong. The right answer was you're going to give it all up to come to our silly exam, whatever kind of generic exam. No one's going to say that. No one can fault you for that. Even if they were the type of person that would do that, they probably would be a little ashamed of that kind of attitude. They probably would know that that's not particularly cool. And so that would be I would feel confident saying that without any hesitation, that I'm saying something that they may not appreciate. And if they're the weird, 1 in 100 people that does think that's inappropriate, they're going to be the minority. There's always a group that is making a decision about you. And usually those notes, if this were a one-on-one, that could be a little more problematic. But with Colorado, 3 people are going to be in the room. At least 2 people are going to be in the room, 2 to 4 people. So there's going to be 1 to 3 other people that's going to have a different opinion than that person, and that's going to help balance it out. And then usually those, even if the people were only 4 in your interview, then your kind of case comes before a larger committee where they deliberate about each candidate. Okay, what do we think about Kevin? Is he the kind of candidate? Here's his notes. Let's pass around his notes from the interview. Here's what he said to this. Here's what he said about the heart attack issue. They're talking about you, and as a group, they're making a decision. Even people that weren't in your interview are helping to make that decision based on reading your notes from the interview. They all kind of do this together because they're trying to find the best candidate. So again, I would be very confident that most people would agree with your answer. So it's a long way of saying it, but yeah, that's the way I would do it. Cool. All right. So it doesn't. Again, I'm with a wax exercise, so I'm not the one to ask. So I would say, please, if you have that question, feel free to send us an email at mail@internationaldentistcentral.com. We can definitely answer that, because I focus on the interview side, interview mastery. So in the interview mastery, it's going to be a few sessions, 2 to 4 sessions with us, I would say. And this one, actually, this is the fully prepared. So this Colorado special comes with 4 sessions. It's 4 hours of, actually more than, I think it's like 6 hours of interview prep. That's what I really focus on. That includes time with me, that includes time with our interview specialists. And so we're really going to kind of coach you through questions like this, like people have asked about tonight, and the ones I brought up tonight. We're going to actually do it on a more personalized method. So if if we're talking about gaps in your CV, gaps in your profile, low test scores, failures of tests, part 1 and part 2, low TOEFL, all those kind of things, is we help you prepare. We actually help you come up with actually tailored responses for any of these kind of questions in your interview, so that you can feel confident knowing how to talk around them and effectively. So cool. All right. Thanks for the questions. Thank you, Dave, for that question. And someone asked, can you repost this workshop? I missed on most of it because of the timing. Yes. Again, thank you guys for coming tonight. And absolutely, I will send this workshop in an email to those who RSVP'd. and who came out or who were willing to try to come out, because I know some people weren't able to come because of the timing issues and some of the mishaps with the technical issues we had. So I'll be sending that out tomorrow once we kind of get it prepared, and you can watch it and have it available at least for, we'll usually keep it about a week or something like that. And then we usually take these and put it into our workshop all access course. So cool. All right. Well, thank you so much. Either way, I really wish all of you the best of luck, both for Colorado, if you have an upcoming interview in Colorado, but also for this year. Let's just, practice, 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 even if things get changed, even if schools have to reschedule stuff, know that it's going to come around eventually. And, in a way, just be, I'm saying what I'm thinking about is just having gratitude for a little more time. There's nothing wrong with more practicing, both for the interview and the bench test and all that kind of stuff. So, and then stay safe out there, wash your hands, everybody, and we'll get through this. Cool. All right, everybody, thanks again, and have a great rest of your evening, and we'll see you next time.